Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to give you a very structured week-by-week study plan that you are going to be able to follow to prepare yourself for your SAT in around 3 months' time. I'm also going to cover how you can avoid the classic mistakes that most students make when they're preparing themselves for the SAT, how you, without a tutor, can diagnose exactly what concepts and question types you need to focus on so you can improve your score as quickly as possible, what topics you need to learn to be able to answer tricky SAT questions like this and this, when you should be taking practice tests, how many practice tests you should be taking, what you should be doing those last few weeks as you head into test day to maximize your score improvement, and a whole lot more. Now, if you don't already know me, my name is Mike. I've been a full-time SAT and ACT tutor for over 7 years. I've helped a handful of my students get perfect 1600s, and just this fall, I've helped 9 of my students score in the 1550 plus range. So needless to say, I know what it takes to get the SAT scores you're looking for, and I'm going to give away a lot of my secrets and a lot of the framework that I use when I'm working with students one-on-one. All right, let's jump straight into week number 1, which is going to be our diagnostic week. And then we're going to learn a little bit of writing and language and math stuff in the second half of the week. But this diagnostic part is going to be incredibly important for helping you to start diagnosing where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, and what you really need to focus on. Now, anytime you're going to take a practice SAT, make sure it is an official College Board one. In the description to this video, I'm going to link where you can find over 40 College Board tests completely for free. But for the sake of the diagnostic video that you'll use for this 12-week program, I want you to start with this test because I'm going to give you free video explanations for those questions. This is really going to help kickstart your learning process. Now, as you take this test, and the same for all tests we're going to take in the future, there's 3 things we want to make sure we're doing so you can get the most out of the test and help you improve as much as possible. Number 1, always take the test in a full sitting. Number 2, be very strict on the timing of the sections. A few extra minutes can really change how easy or hard an SAT feels. And number 3, mark any questions that you feel a little bit unsure of where you do not know exactly why an answer is right versus wrong. For this first test, you may be marking the majority of the questions, but that's totally fine. That just means we have a lot of content that we need to learn, but once we know what we need to learn, we can really improve. There is nothing stopping you from improving a lot besides putting in the effort in learning the content tested on the SAT. Now, once you finish this practice test, you're going to grade it up, and for any questions you've missed, as well as any of the questions you marked that you felt a little bit iffy on, you're going to go and use one of the diagnostic sheets. I'll link the practice test number 7 diagnostic sheet, which you can kind of see a little bit of an example here of in the description to this video, and that's going to let you start to understand exactly what concepts you missed and what question types you missed, because it's going to let you know exactly what was being tested on every single question across this test, as well as the rest of the College Board tests. And once you do that, I want you to write out a big list of all of those concepts and list them between the reading, writing, and language and math from most frequent to least frequent, so you start to understand where you really need to be focusing your attention. And now you're going to have a really nice big grouping of questions and topics that you need to dive into, which is going to let you move around topics a little bit in the week-by-week study plans we're going to go through and customize your own study plan for this 3-month process. Now, one thing with this, though, is unless you're missing under 6 questions on the writing and language section, I strongly recommend you to still learn all of the rules tested there, because this is one of the easiest places to improve your score, and writing and language and math are far easier to improve on because they're just about knowing the rules, the formulas, the structures, the patterns you're looking for. They are very black and white why answers are right versus wrong, whereas reading is going to take a little bit more kind of elbow grease to get to the score you're looking for. Now, writing and language, I almost always cover all of the rules with my students, whether they're starting at a 1470 or a 1050, because it's going to help us improve and pick up some easy points. So in this first week, what I always start out with for my students are our sentence structure rules as well as our comma rules. If you don't know the 4 types of commas, you don't know independent versus dependent clauses, this is going to really help you start to understand a lot of the questions on the writing and language section, and you can learn all of those rules completely for free. You don't need a credit card. There's no catches in the free trial of my course. So in about an hour and a half, you're going to learn a ton of these important grammar rules and really kickstart your learning. Now for math in this first week, we want to focus on test tricks, and we want to make sure your algebra skills are good, as well as you're really comfortable working with fractions, especially fractions with variables. So I'm also going to link up here some free math playlists, which are going to help you improve on the math. All right, now before we jump into the content that you want to focus on week 2, which you can see here, so I'm not going to talk through all of those, I also wanted to talk briefly about kind of what resources you can use, because before you're doing all this work, you want to make sure you have some pretty good resources. There's lots of pretty good math books out there. I would definitely say my one I would strongly recommend that you use, because you're going to be able to use it with those diagnostic sheets, and it's really just a more up-to-date version of College Panda. We cover everything you have to know in the test and give you problems that scale from easy to hard. But College Panda is also a pretty good math book. For your online resources, which are totally free, Khan Academy is the most classic one. Khan Academy is a really good starting place for a lot of math. It's really normal for a lot of students to seem to get stuck in those mid-high 600s because Khan Academy doesn't quite get difficult enough. There's tons of students I've worked with over the years who've done all of the skill drills and they can't break that 700 mark, but it's definitely a good free resource that you could still use along with this plan here and jump into those different concepts covered there. Now for writing and language, there's not really a lot of great free online resources. Khan Academy is really bad for writing and language. The questions are ridiculously easy compared to what you see on the test, and their lessons in terms of the rules aren't really great. All the stuff that we'll cover in this video is taught in detail in my SAT course, but this video is less about selling you on that and more talking about how you can do it for free. So you can always also look up YouTube videos around these different grammar rules I'm going through, YouTube videos for reading rules. You can find blog posts. You can find online forums. There's tons of places you can find this stuff for free. It's just going to take a little more of your time. It's going to be hard to know the quality of the advice that you're following, but if you test it out and you really learn the rules and you are careful about reviewing your mistakes, you can still make a lot of progress. But that's kind of the brief overview. If you guys have any questions on that stuff at all, pop it in the comments below and I'll really break down and be more than happy to answer your questions, whether the resources you're using or your strategy sounds like something that will help you out. But this second week, we're going to start jumping into some of the reading, and we're going to really do a little bit of all of the different sections here. Now, reading is the one place which is often a little bit more challenging, because for reading, it's unlike writing and language and math that are very black and white in terms of the rules and the structures you're following. Reading has some reading comprehension skills, and for all the different methods, what works great for one student can work really poorly for another because of differences in reading speed, comprehension, short-term memory. So if you're going to be prepping yourself for your own reading, really just kind of do some pretty deep thinking and really break down what's happening on that section, what your issues are. Are you struggling to find the evidence? Do you find yourself reading and you're not really retaining the information? Well, maybe reading the whole passage isn't super helpful for you. Try looking at the questions first. Try breaking the passages up. You can do a lot of stuff and experiment. It's going to take you some more time, but you're still going to be able to figure out what works well for you. But that's going to be it for week 2. We're learning a lot more of the important content across the board for the different sections, but no practice tests this week. All right, so for week 3, we're going to do a little bit more of deep digging into the reading section. We really want to start thinking about how we can break the questions down, how we can use the answer choices. Probably the most important thing you want to focus on this week is really starting to understand what's making stuff right versus wrong on the SAT reading section. Everything on the test has to be objectively right versus wrong. So really starting to dive into those right versus wrong and looking back at your mistakes and looking at what made an answer right is really going to start to improve you on the reading section here. Now for writing and language, we want to knock out 2 more of the big subjects here of pronouns and verbs. And I have a really helpful little video here, which is one of my favorite hacks, which takes one of the hardest SAT writing and language questions and gives you a cheating way of finding the right answer every single time. And for math, we're going to knock out 2 of our most commonly tested concepts, which are exponents and quadratics. Now, quadratics are broken down for the entire lesson. All of the practice questions you can get for free in my free trial as well. This is a place where there's a ton of little formulas that really make a lot of the most challenging questions on the SAT way easier. All right, now in week 4, we are going to take another practice test, and we want to follow those same 3 steps we did before, but you want to wait to take this practice test until you have worked through all of the content for this week. So the big thing in reading is we're going to make sure you're learning how to do those evidence-based questions, those paired evidence questions, which I'll pop an example of like this. make up almost 30% of your SAT reading section, so mastering those can make a huge difference on your score. We'll knock out some more writing and language and a good bit more math. Now, the other thing, before you take this next practice test, spend a little bit of time reviewing the content we've learned so far, look back at your mistakes from your first practice test, and then as you take this one, same steps we're going to follow, and hopefully we'll see that you've started to make a good bit of progress with everything we've been learning. All right, so week 5, this is the content that we're going to be covering, which is pretty straightforward. But one of the best things, which is going to help you make it all the way through the 12 weeks and keep improving, is maintaining motivation. And a huge part of motivation is seeing that the work you're putting in is actually paying off. So what I always recommend for students to do is, once you've completed this next practice test, look back at that first one. Look at the difference of all the questions you were marking back then versus the ones you're marking now that you felt a little bit iffy on. Take note of that progress. Take note of how your score has improved, but don't be discouraged if your score hasn't improved as much as you want. It's going to take a few practice tests, so we're going to start upping the frequency of those before you really put all the patterns in place. So if your score hasn't bumped up a ton, still start to note how much more comfortable and confident you're feeling with the test. This is going to help you stay motivated. Additionally, give yourself a fun reward. You've been putting in a month's worth of work, so buy yourself something nice, go get one of your favorite foods, do something rewarding to yourself, because this is going to help you stay encouraged. Now, the other thing we really want to do this week, which isn't as straightforward, is the grammar review. So what I always recommend for students, because now we have covered a lot of grammar rules that you've been memorizing, is to go back and kind of quiz yourself on these. Make sure you know what you have to see before a clause and what you have to see after a clause. Create a Quizlet, create a study guide. This is really going to help you know what rules are completely solidified in your brain and where you need to go back and study a little bit more. And what I always do for my students, and as part of my course, is I put them through a nice set of 40 hard grammar focused questions. But if you want to prep yourself for free, I would just recommend adding in an extra writing and language section this week so you can use that after you've reviewed your rules. All right, for week 6, this is what you're going to be working through. So there's not a lot we're going to talk through, so this is going to be pretty brief, but a little bit lighter workload this week. We've now covered almost all of the content for the reading and writing and language sections. We're about halfway through what we have to work through for the math sections. All right, so for week 7 here, the main stuff I wanted to talk through is this 13-minute drill. So this 13-minute drill, once we've learned all the basic concepts and content around the reading section, it's still completely normal to be struggling a little bit to put everything together, or to sometimes be bouncing around between different methods. And this is something you can even use way earlier in the process as well. But our 13-minute drill is really just going to be using any of those other free practice tests, putting 13 minutes on the clock and just working through one passage at a time. This is going to give you a lot quicker of a feedback loop. And at the end of every passage, what I want you to do is reflect on what went well, what went poorly, what you could have done to get an answer right, what made you get an answer wrong, because by going passage by passage, you're going to remember your exact thought process really well, and you're going to really be able to start to learn from your mistakes and really learn about what's making answer choices right versus wrong, and what part of your process is stopping you from improving as much as possible. Now, the other big thing this week is we're going to take another practice test. Now, even as we get further and further down the line in practice tests, you always want to go back and review the mistakes from your last few practice tests. This is going to help you generate a sense of pattern recognition, let you know where you're trending positively, where you're kind of getting stuck, and where you need to focus more time on and less time on so you can continue customizing this plan as you're going through. But once again, when you take this test, full sitting, be strict on the timing, mark anything you feel iffy on, use that diagnostic sheet to let you know what subject matter you need to focus on after you finish this test. All right, week 8, we are 2/3 of the way there and we are through most of the content. So once again, we just want to spend a little time reviewing our practice test this week, do more of those 13-minute drills if you're still struggling a little bit on the reading section. Now for the math here, few important things. Circles is one of the most common places I see students struggle. Make sure you get your completing the square down. Make sure you feel comfortable finding the entire equation of a circle given 2 points. Those are some of the classic difficult SAT questions there that you need to know a little bit more specific, but everything else should be pretty straightforward for this week. All right, week 9, we have now covered most of the content we need across the different sections. So this is really where, depending on how you're doing, you want to supplement these practice tests with a little bit of extra practice stuff depending on whichever section is holding you back. If it's reading, do more of those 13-minute drills. If it's writing and language, add extra of those sections. And after this week, we're going to talk about what I always do with my students for the last few weeks to really ramp up their math scores. But once again, review those practice tests before you take this next one. Use those diagnostic sheets. Be careful with reviewing your mistakes. We should continue to see you improve every single time you take a test. All right, and now we're on the home stretch at week 10. So same thing I talked about before. Start to customize your focus for where your weaknesses are. But whenever I'm working with students, and for all the students who go through my course, these last few weeks, what we really try to do is ramp up and fine tune our math. So I have an advanced math course, which is 150 really difficult questions and in-depth video explanations for all of them. And this is something I put all of my students through, and it's something that commonly takes students who are stuck in that high 600s or low 700s and really starts to push their scores up. But you could also do this on your own for free by really just going through a ton of SATs and working through those challenging questions. But I'll have a special discount for that in the description below. But the benefit of starting to work through a lot of challenging math problems this last few weeks is it fine-tunes your skills. It lets you assess what formulas and concepts we learned earlier that you need to go back and refresh on. And it really starts to fine-tune all of those advanced problem-solving strategies that you're going to need to feel comfortable applying on test day if you want to score 750 to 800 on the math section. These last few weeks, we want to do another practice test once again. So really kind of grip down, grind down. It's now crunch time. Make sure you're really carefully reviewing your mistakes from every previous practice test before you take the next one. This is going to help that pattern recognition and help you really start to put together a lot of teeny tiny pieces, which make a big difference for getting those really high scores on the SAT. All right, week 11, we are now really in the home stretch of your SAT prep process. Now, this week, we will have learned almost all of our SAT math content. This is really mostly going to function as a review week. We're going to do some more challenging math problems so we can continue to use that as a way to review where we're at on concepts and fine-tune those high-level skills. And we're going to take our final practice test this weekend. So we want to prep for that final practice test the same way you'd want to typically prep for the SAT, which is the following weekend. So you want to do all of that kind of cramming type studying you feel an instinct of doing. Ideally, we won't need to do that because you will have learned all the content really well. But this week, really try to treat it the same way you would as if your real SAT was on Saturday. So start getting on a good sleep schedule, which is going to carry over into next week. Go back and revisit all of the previous practice tests we've gone through and look back at all of the questions you missed and redo them for the writing section and the math section so you can go back through any of those ones you missed and make sure you understand exactly how to get them right now. For reading, look back through all your mistakes and see if there's any common threads that we still need to focus on, and then take this final practice test Saturday at 8:30 a.m. Be really strict with timing, all the same stuff we've done, and then we're going to get to week 12. In week 12, I always still have my students go through some more of those advanced math problems, so we're continuing to fine-tune heading into test day and use that as a way to review, but otherwise, it's really just a review week. So we want to make sure all of those formulas, all of those rules, all of our strategies are good heading into test day, and we really want to kind of mentally prepare ourselves for test day. So we want to get well rested. We want to make sure we know how we're going to react to different situations on test day. We want to make sure we have a watch, which is going to help us keep track of time. We want to make sure our calculators are charged. We're going to have snacks. All this really basic stuff is going to make a big difference when we get to test day, but just spend some time every night, Monday through Thursday, reviewing. You can do a little bit of review Friday afternoon, but mostly Friday should be you relaxing. We've put in a lot of work over these last 3 months to get you in position to have success on test day. So at this point, it's just going in and taking the test. Now, if this is the first SAT that you are taking, sometimes students go in and the pressure of test day can get them to them a little bit. If that happens to you, don't beat yourself up. It's a relatively normal part of the process. Make sure you are signed up for another SAT test. But if we've prepped really well, if we've been really strict on how we've timed the SATs, hopefully you're going to be one and done and you're going to have a score that you're really happy with. And that's it for your 3-month study plan for the SAT. So I hope this video has really helped you out. Please like, subscribe, save this video, and share it with some friends. Make sure you revisit this throughout your study process for some of the little pointers I put in throughout this video as well. But if you guys have any questions around the study plan or resources, or if you're working through this general study plan and you're hitting some sticking points, pop the questions below.